Hello, everybody, and welcome to Career Strategy Session 2 in the Career Strategy Club. All of the people that are in the club, you're here for the second group strategy session where I'm going to, one, talk through in detail the material that you've received for month 2, as well as answer any questions that you might have. Some of you have sent me questions prior to the session because you can't actually attend live, and many of you will be catching the session on replay. But you can ask me anything in the portal by submitting your questions, whether it's a question as a result of this session, whether it's a question from the material that you're working through, or whether it's a question that's burning in your mind and you need to get an answer to it. So the Ask Me Anythings are available for you to be able to work through. This month of month 2 saw us deepening our Know Yourself material and the Project Yourself and the Connect Yourself. It felt to me as if there was a little bit of a more intentional slowing down with the material. There wasn't so many things, but they were smaller but big things, or one thing but many things. Not one thing, there were smaller things to do that were bigger, if that makes sense. So let's get straight into it. The Know Yourself stage, I invited you to complete the Dr. John DeMartini value determination process. This was an online assessment where you would log on to his value determination process on his portal or on his website, and you would then create a user profile and answer 13 questions and go through this sort of very interesting user-based process where at the end of it, you would have then got a hierarchy of your values. Now, I'm going to really just encourage you to, one, if you haven't done this, do this. 2, if you have done it, I'm going to share some ideas of what you can do to extrapolate the knowledge and the learning from this values. And 3, put a date in your diary for 2025, for the next year, where you repeat the value determination process. You're not able to log in to this particular assessment within less than a year. So you're only able to do it after 12 months because the DeMartini Institute and Dr. John DeMartini believes that your values that you have now are pretty much going to stay stable throughout the next 12 months. So when you received your value of hierarchies from Dr. John DeMartini, when you completed them, it would have your name and the date on top. What I'd love for you all to do is take action now and future book a time in the next year in your diary on the same date as that, where you repeat the process. Create a calendar meeting, put the link in and say that you are going to reassess your values. Because why? Because values are the most central. They're the engine room of everything that drives us. They're the engine room of everything that makes us want to get out of bed, makes us want to do things, makes us want to work harder or slow down, or makes us not want to do stuff. It all comes down to values. And you know, many of you will know that who've been in my world, in my community, is that I speak a lot about how we're not socialized into focusing on this. At no point in our secondary education, certainly me included, did anybody ever talk to me about values. At no point at all. My parents used the word values, and they spoke about things like, honesty, integrity, and family values, and so forth. That came from my nurturing, from my upbringing. But from an educational perspective, nobody cared about my values. And when I went out into my career and started looking for work, nobody really cared about my values. And when I came across, it was almost like I stumbled across Dr. John DeMartini and his value determination process, a light bulb went on inside. And he often talks about this, so much so that he's doubled down on the value determination process. I mean, it is his signature offering. And in the process of completing it here in the Career Strategy Club, you would have needed to sign up to his newsletter, and you might still be receiving some information from him. And I think that's wonderful, because Dr. John DeMartini is an amazing thought leader of the world today, and will continue to really challenge the way that we think about ourselves and how we interact with others. However, you don't have to stay signed up to Dr. John DeMartini at all. I just wanted to extrapolate the value determination process because he's made it so interesting. And you'll see that in that workbook, there's a photograph of Dr. John DeMartini and I. Prior to the pandemic and COVID, he used to travel a lot. In fact, his values are research, travel, and teaching. So that is what he focuses on. And the lower order things in his world don't really, his value is not to buy a house and, put down roots. His value is not to climb the corporate ladder. And certainly his value is not to do anything other than be focused on that research element of his. So the photograph of he and I had the great opportunity of meeting with him. In fact, each time that he has come to Cape Town, I've been to see him and to spend time with him. And he has, apart from his understanding, his knowledge and his research, his empathy, just who he is as a man, as a human being, is just incredible. He imbues this type of quiet, confident knowingness. So I certainly put him on the same level as a guru, a saint, somebody who has this inner knowingness and wisdom of mankind and womankind. But let's talk about the values. That's a little bit of a personal journey that I've taken with Dr. John DeMartini. So in my career work, both within myself and the work that I teach and have been doing so for the past 10 years on a one-to-one basis, I always pause to bring recognition to values, because really the important thing here is, what is it that you are going to want to spend time, effort, energy, and focus on? Now, I know that some of you, by completing the hierarchy of values with the DeMartini process, might be a little bit confused, because you might be looking at values that say things like family or health or earning or well-being or economic potential. Those words that you've chosen to categorize the things that you put the most amount of focus on might be confusing. That's okay. Don't worry about it. There is no right or wrong. There is no perfect. It simply is what you've chosen and how you've engaged with the online process of establishing your values. You could, however, record those 13 questions that he asks and consider them yourself. But if you feel like you want more exploration into values, in the extra resource session, in the career strategy session, there's a pre-recorded tab where I recorded a career strategy session specifically on values, and I shared 2 other ways of determining your values. And there I talk about how you can determine your values through the eyes of others by looking at people that you admire and respect. And the other is a way of determining your values by just reflecting and being quiet and considering what words come to mind. So there are other ways for you to access this knowledge of your values, not just through the DeMartini method, because I acknowledge that the DeMartini method is something, right? Is it easy? Is it hard? Those aren't the questions. Can you complete it? Yes. Is there knowledge and clarity on the other side of completing it? 100%. Will it take a little bit of thinking and a little bit of jigging and a little bit of assessing? Sure. Everything does, right? If values were so easy to identify and they were so surface level that you simply completed a process and there they were and you got it, we wouldn't need to be here, would we? So this is an invitation for you to delve into them, to really understand what's important. So in your hierarchy, if you have quadrants that are very broad in your beautiful color wheel, like family or work or health, it's for you perhaps then to further interrogate what elements about family is it that you value, or what elements about health is it that you value. And I'm going to share some situational examples with clients that I've worked with that will help you understand how the value determination process really can work with you in your career. And the first comes from an amazing, beautiful, all my clients are amazing, as all of you club members are, but a wonderful young client who had completed her MBA with a big organization, and she'd been told that she was going to be the youngest Black female executive in the C-suite. And as she had completed, they had invested in her to do her MBA, which she was very excited about. And as she had completed it, she felt like she was plateauing. And she connected with me 3 years post completing her MBA, which was, she'd done an executive MBA, so she'd taken the 2 years to do it, which was now then 5 years after the fact that she had been told by her CEO, you're going to be on the executive C-suite. And she felt like, one, this was lip service, it was never going to happen. Two, she started to distrust them. And three, she started to question, did she actually want to invest in this particular organization and company? She wasn't unhappy in her work and she wasn't dissatisfied. She felt as if there must be something more, and she didn't like the fact that they'd made a commitment but they weren't following through on it. So she thought, she knew she wanted to get a bit more strategic about her career and look at what her options would be. When we got to the value determination process, she was consciously aware of some of the feedback that she had been given in her annual reviews in the last 3 years post completing her MBA. And her beautiful wagon wheel was actually 2/3 related to her appearance. So her values at that time were gymming, health, hairing, saloning, going to the spa, shopping, traveling for shopping trips, reading Vogue magazines, best nails, best eyelashes, best shoes, best everything. She was a exquisite young woman who was immaculately put together, and she spent time, effort, money, focus, reading, research. Everything around her was how she looked, how she kept her body, what clothes she wore, and so forth. And immediately as she completed the values and sent it to me, she said to me, well, this is the problem. This is why they don't want me to be in the C-suite. They think that I'm just a fashion model. They think that I appreciate I value looks more than I do brains. And that's why, somebody within the team had given her this sort of confidential feedback. She said, well, there we go. You see, that's the problem. I'm not cut out for the C-suite. And I said, whoa, hold on a second. Let's unpack this a little bit further. And we went into really unpacking it. And the reality, what the value determination showed her, not on that first level, was that, yes, she valued appearance and how she looked, and she was going to spend time, effort, money on hair, clothes, skin, facial, you name it. When she unpacked that, she was able to clarify this. She was able to say, well, look, Licia, I'm an all-consuming type of personality. And when I go at something, I give it my all, which she had done in her MBA. So this was now post her MBA, where she found there was this big, there was space and expansion in her life because she wasn't focused on her MBA. She also wasn't married. She wasn't a wife. She wasn't in a relationship. She didn't have any children. So weekends were times for her to choose entirely what she wanted to do and invest in how she wanted to invest her time without the necessity of having to do it for anyone else. She was able to be, sovereign and make those decisions for herself. And she, yes, was an intelligent person who wanted to continue to learn and grow. But I said to her, of the Vogue magazines that you're loving to absorb and read, and the various places to buy amazing clothes and so forth, why is it, if are you not wanting to focus on growing your mind? And she was completely absorbed with the work that she was doing, and she was enjoying it. She was very people orientated, and she enjoyed what she was doing. But she realized through the value determination process, this is not what she realized. She knew that she wasn't going to resign from one company and go and become a fashion model. She wasn't going to go and join Vogue magazine. She wasn't going to immigrate to Paris and spend time down the runways. All of these things that she had the time and space for, she loved. But what the realization showed her was just how much time and space she was allowing these things to absorb her versus carving out some time for something else that might move her forward in her career. So she was then able to say, every time she was invited for year-end functions to the C-suite, with get-togethers with the wives, she would end up talking to the wives, advising them about where they could have hair treatments or buy something, that would suit them, versus actually talking with some of the business owners and her colleagues around business orientation. So they started to get the sense that she wasn't invested in the company. It was something that had absorbed and come into the space and time from completing her MBA without her thinking about it. So what the value determination did, it wasn't about her going, I can't read a Vogue magazine, or I can't go on shopping trips, or I shouldn't spend all weekend at the spa. It was about her making the decision around what was important, what did she want, and was she allowing herself to be perceived in a certain way versus controlling that and managing the narrative so that they weren't these assumptions. What she chose to do, because she was this type of go-getting, forward-thinking person and all-consuming, is first thing on Monday morning after we had our session, she went straight to her CEO and she said, I think I know what the problem might be. I've been frustrated that you haven't opened the doors to the C-suite sooner for me, but I see that I haven't really been acting as if I've been invested in what's going to grow the company in this time and the space that I've had after my MBA. I love that you invested in me to do my MBA. I don't want to be in the C-suite. What I want you to do is carousel me throughout the business. I want to learn about operations and logistics and sales and marketing. I want to learn about everything about this business so that I can then step into the C-suite knowing that I've got the right space and place. I don't just want to be in the head office where I am here. And the MBA, the thesis that she had done, was specific to this particular business and its industry because they had paid for her to do it and she was interested in it. She loved the organization. She loved the culture. She just didn't love the fact that there seemed to be this mistrust. The value determination gave her the clarity of seeing why the mistrust was there. She wasn't at fault for having 2/3 of her beautiful color chart focused on how she looked. She was always going to be that. But what she needed to do was make the decision about what was going to get her further in her career. What did she actually want in her career? And was she happy to not be in the C-suite and have the 2/3 focusing time, effort on herself? Or did she want to make some adjustments? And that's what the value determination did for her. It was kind of like looking through a microscopic lens of how she was being perceived. So I love the fact that we were able to, one, prevent her from leaving a company that she actually loved, two, hold her accountable to what she was spending time, effort, and energy on, rather than her thinking, the next shiny thing that came along was going to engross her. She could really sense and feel how she had the space and time to do what she chose to do. Anyway, the end of the story with this particular client is that she's still with that organization. She carouseled, they put her straight into finance first because they thought, well, if you're going to learn anything about the business, you've got to learn about it from the balance sheet. And then she went from that into the logistics side of it, which she absolutely loved. And now she's in an operations side. She's actually being groomed as a newly created chief operating officer, COO for the business, because she understands everything about it. And no, she never had to change. She never had to go and find something else that was dissatisfying or just change one thing up for another thing without really knowing herself and who she was. So that is one example of a really important value determination kind of intervention, if you want. And then another one very quickly I'll run through was a client of mine who had approached me because he loved the work that he did. In fact, he said to me he loved work too much. He worked too hard and it was affecting his relationship with his family, his two children, and his wife. And a crystallizing moment for him was that he had done the Ironman previously, and his wife came to him and said she wanted to do the Ironman, which meant that he would have to take time out of work, not to go on holiday, but take time out of work to actually have to look after his children. And it made him feel really frustrated and angry. And then he thought, I can't, the work is too demanding. I need to change work and then I'll be able to bring balance to the rest of my life. And of course, you can imagine what his value determination chart showed him. It showed the 2/3 of work, 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 work. And he said, well, you see, this is it. This is my problem. I love my work too much. And, I can't be balanced. I can't, I need somebody to help me figure this out. And I said, hold on a second. You do love the work that you do, and there's nothing wrong with that. But just because you value this doesn't mean you're a bad father, doesn't mean you're a bad husband, and it certainly doesn't mean that you need to change jobs. In fact, that's the very last thing it needs. What this means is that you and I need to think about ways to create structure and organization in your life so that you can show up as the husband, father, and family man that you at your heart want to be, but just at the moment, you're valuing so much about the work that you do because he was just loving the expansion and work he was doing, which is so interesting that somebody at that point, the friction that he was feeling was that he was enjoying his work too much. Bizarre, but can you believe that that's also friction that some people experience? So as a result of the value determination, I needed to see this in him to really understand what the concerns were and what he was telling me was. And we were able then to further expand what Dr. John DeMartini talks about in the values determination process, which is really about, now that you know what you value most, how can you organize those so that your lower order values aren't totally rejected and omitted, but that you bring them into play. So this was, again, prior to COVID happening, and I made the suggestion that he works 2 or at least 1 day a week at home. He had a beautiful big home office which he could work from, so he suggested that. His company were quite fine with that because he was such a hard worker. So the days that he actually structured for 2 days to be at home, and his family just knew that he was in the office, but they had a closer sense of proximity to him, and it made them feel a little bit more closer to him rather than he was just always away and not available. Another thing that he did was that he really looked quite closely about how to create the time that he had where he wasn't working to invest it intentionally within his family and with his family members. So he made a commitment to take his son on a dad and son camping trip every quarter. Just the two of them would do camping. He did the same with his teenage daughter, and she wanted to go to Belito, and he nearly stuck pins in his eyes because he messaged me on the Saturday night of the weekend with his teenage daughter in Belito going, I can't believe I'm doing this, but I actually am loving it. And I'm not even working at all, and we're just spending time hanging around the lifeguards on the beach. So small things like that. He became intentional about spending time with his wife. He structured every Wednesday night was date night. He did things with her. He made an intentional commitment to be able to spend time within the family and within his home. Now, nobody at any point had kind of told him that he was doing anything wrong by working hard, but he knew within himself that this was not sustainable for his life and what he wanted to do. And in fact, he then committed to do the Ironman training with his wife. She was going to do the Iron Woman and he was going to do the Ironman. They couldn't do it at the same time because I don't think the events happen at the same time, but they were going to train together. So he was spending more time training with his wife and they weren't doing things separately, which all of this might seem so obvious to any of you listening to me, but it wasn't obvious to him. The point is, he didn't really get this until he was able to go into the value determination and look at the other slices of life that were important to him and how they mattered. And I'm so glad these are two, could be slightly extreme examples of using the value determination process, but in the latter, my client, I'm so glad that we were able to do this because he potentially might have resigned, left, moved somewhere else, or changed up his job, and then that would have come with a whole bunch of other knots and tangles that wouldn't have streamlined things for him as he needed it to be streamlined. It was as if the value determination in both these instances were giving my clients the permission to be who they actually were, but then decide what did they want to do with that information. And that's the greatest gift that I would like for all of you to have. Now, at the end of the week one of month 2, which was the Know Yourself stage that I've discussed, the value determination, I did invite you to send me what you have. So anybody in the club, if you've completed it and you'd like to get some further thoughts, by all means, send me your value determination process and we can unpack that further together. Now, moving on to week 2 of month 2, which is the Project Yourself material, where we solely focused on LinkedIn recommendation and recommendation strategies. The material would have shared something about a little bit about social proof and how important it is for you to take control of that. And really the most valuable element of a LinkedIn profile, apart from many other things in terms of how it looks, is the recommendation section. It's like the TripAdvisor to your brand. And in that section, in that week's material, I shared some different ways of getting recommendations. And you can never have too many, and you can never give too many. And in the LinkedIn recommendation function, you can see that you can choose whose recommendation is visible that you've received and whose recommendation is visible that you've given. So, for example, you could recommend 300 people, but none of them are visible on your profile. And you could receive 3 recommendations, and one of them speaks to an element of your career identity that you're not yet ready for the LinkedInverse to see. You can toggle that off so it's only private for you, but it means that you still keep it, and then you can make it relevant when you do want it to be seen. So, for example, in the case of a client of mine who was working a job, but at the same time as building out a consulting gig, he had asked for recommendations after each of his completed consulting projects from his clients, and they'd all highly recommended him as the consultant that he was to them. He didn't want this to be visible on his LinkedIn profile, though, because he wasn't yet ready to resign and build out that pathway. He was in the process of building out the pathway, so he didn't necessarily want his LinkedIn profile to speak about consulting work. So LinkedIn gave us this option. The second thing is that you don't actually have to have worked with somebody to give them a recommendation. I'd like you to think quite strategically about who are the people that you know in your niche, industry, organization, field. You must have interacted with them, whether you heard them speak from a stage, whether you've read their book, whether you've engaged with them in some form or other. You simply just have to be connected to them in order to recommend them. Now, I don't know anybody who rejects or doesn't accept a recommendation that is thoughtful, that is authentic, and speaks specifically to something that the person knows about themselves or wants the world to know. They then can toggle the recommendations to be visible or not, as I shared the example of my client, that nobody's going to not accept a recommendation. So think about this for a moment. Who are some of the senior people that you could recommend? Again, you don't necessarily have to have had a close working relationship with them where you reported directly to them. You can recommend somebody for how they've run their team or how they've conducted themselves or what they've done, and how this has positively impacted your career. And that is quite a strategic connection for somebody to see on your profile, that you have connected yourself to the senior person and to the point where you've given them a recommendation. So recommendations can be very, very strategic. In terms of asking for recommendations for yourself, I 100% recommend that you always highly customize it. So in the function on LinkedIn, where you type in, LinkedIn come up with a default of, "Dear Alicia, would you kindly give me a recommendation? Thank you in advance." You're going to remove that and you're going to say, "Hi, Alicia, please give me a recommendation for XYZ. Be specific about what you want to be asked to, what you want to be recommended for. I find that most people don't give recommendations, not because they don't want to, not because they don't have anything nice to say about you. They just don't know how to formulate it so it reads well for LinkedIn. People can get quite sort of stuck up on, I don't know what to say, or I don't know how to say this properly, or how to articulate it correctly. If you give them a, please recommend me for this and this, two things, then it's directing their thinking, it's narrowing it down. It's not as if they have to talk about everything about you. They've got something very specific that they can speak to, and they're more likely to be able to answer to that rather than, what am I going to say? And the one thing that we don't want on our LinkedIn profile is a whole bunch of vague recommendations. You were wonderful. You were so great. You were such a team player. Goodness forbid. We don't want broad generalizations. We want specifics. Now think about what language and words and what information you want to project on your LinkedIn profile. You're going to extrapolate some of those pieces and use them specifically in the request for the recommendation. So, for example, in my case, what I often do when I ask for my clients for a recommendation is I'll ask for strategy, strategic, big ideas converted into actionable tasks. I kind of talk about, I use the language that I take a stand for in the world, and I weave that into the recommendation so that there is what you can find. I always say to my clients, please tell me from the heart how you enjoyed working with me, and could you also add X, Y, Z? So getting strategic is on the recommendations is very important. I would recommend that you set a time in your diary on a weekly basis. Call it something cool like giving love and getting love, or recommendation strategy on steroids, something interesting and fun. Hopefully that'll make you have a giggle as usual. Set some time consistently over the next month to give and ask for recommendations, because it doesn't happen overnight. You need to do 2 or 3, bunch them together, send a couple of recommendations, and then 2 or 3, send a couple of requests for recommendations. You do need to run the numbers. If you want 3 recommendations on your LinkedIn profile, you've actually got to ask for 9 or 12, because not everyone's going to respond immediately, and not everyone's going to perhaps know what to say. You can also order the recommendations that you request for in terms of asking for recommendations from the people that you know who are dead certs. They're good mates. They're people that will give you a really great recommendation. Ask for them first, and you can WhatsApp them and say, hey, I've asked for a recommendation, please help. Or you could email them and say, just to let you know, I've pinged you on LinkedIn for a recommendation. I'd really appreciate if you would mention something about the great work that we did together whilst on this project, because I value your thoughts. Make your recommendees feel important and valued. People love to be a part of something. And if they feel that they're a part of helping build your brand on LinkedIn, online, they're going to love it. And a LinkedIn recommendation, once committed to you and visible on your profile, whether it's visible for you or visible for only you when you want it to be visible, it's committed into the public arena. That recommendation isn't something private that you need to then go back to the recommendee and ask them for permission to share it. You can extrapolate some of those words and include it in a CV. You can take some of that information and include it in a brand brochure about you. So LinkedIn recommendations is the bar, the golden bar that shifts things on your profile. I always get extremely suspicious when I look at a beautiful written LinkedIn profile where you can see that it's so professional, and then you get to the recommendations section and either there's nothing or there's one from 19 Futsag. I get highly suspicious about that. This is the TripAdvisor to your brand, and you can never have too many, and you can never ask for too many and you can never give too many. So spread the love by recommending a whole bunch of people that you've worked with and being authentic and specific with what you recommend them for. That almost immediately triggers them to recommend you back. But this is a strategic process. Think about what you want. Think about who you need to say the right things, who you want to say the right things about you, and ask them to, and then get that social proof for your brand online. So that was the Project Yourself stage. One piece, but a big piece that is a consistent thing that I want you to do for the rest of this month and into month 3, so that I get the great pleasure of coming over to your LinkedIn profiles and seeing the wonderful recommendations that you've had. Don't underestimate the power of LinkedIn recommendations. They are super, super important. And then very quickly, that brings us to week 3 of month 2, which was Connect Yourself material. And in this Connect Yourself stage, we deepened the knowledge of actually having spreadsheets of people that you know. Month 1 of the Connect Yourself stage was where I introduced you into influencers and champions and people you should know and blue sky people. This month, it's about deepening that in terms of understanding how to design your network and then knowing what to do in terms of nurturing your network. And again, nobody ever taught us this. The word networking actually has that kind of icky, sticky, I don't want to do that. Whatever that is, I don't want to do it sense about it. And one thing that I know, that I will repeat, that I will put the stake in, this is the hill that I will lie on forever, is we cannot control what companies can do. We cannot control whether the rand is up or down. We can't control anything about what happens in the world of work, but we can control the people that we know, the people that we forge connections with and continue to know, and how we nurture our network. And anybody in the history of the future of work will tell you that specifically with this huge AI wave of hyper technology and hyper intuitive machine learning coming our way, we want to forge greater human connections with people. Now more so than ever. It has always been important and it will always be important. One conversation with one person can change everything. You and I know that. We all know that. Why then aren't we creating systems and structures and frameworks to manage the conversations that we're having, to manage the people that we know? And when I say manage, know who they are and know who we want to know more of and invite more of into our world, and know who we don't want to invite into our network and into our world. And that is what the Connect Yourself stage is. We're just going to deepen on the various strategies with that. So the Nurture Your Network ebook really is about how can you nurture your network in ways that don't feel icky, sticky, and uncomfortable. And the Design Your Network encourages you or invites you to craft ways that you can totally recreate and design your network. If tomorrow happened and you didn't know anybody, if you landed in a brand new country and you didn't know somebody, or if you had to start in a brand new organization, you didn't know a soul, and you needed to design your network, this material, this ebook would be specifically there for you. So I so look forward to you working through both of those elements. And again, my invitation, as is the case in the Know Yourself Value Determination piece, my invitation in the Connect Yourself piece is send me what you've got. Send me what you have on the Ask for Anything form. Log into that, send me the questions that you might have, and send me the work that you've completed in the Connect Yourself stage. The Project Yourself stage, the LinkedIn recommendation strategy, I'm going to be seeing you in the online visibility community, the group that we have for club members, as well as on, I'll be seeing you on LinkedIn and on your LinkedIn profile. So my friends, that is the summary of the material that you've received in month 2. Can't wait for you to dig into it. If you have or if you haven't, you're never behind in your career strategy. And the club is purposed to give you one bite-sized piece that you can work with weekly that starts to stack up so that you get this wonderful momentum. So for everybody who is here live today, we're going to go into some questions and some answers now for a few moments. And then for everybody who's going to be catching this on the replay, I look forward to seeing whatever you might have for me in terms of ask me anythings, or you can even ping me on LinkedIn and say, hey, look at this great recommendation that I've received. So thank you, thank you, thank you. And I will see you all in the club for month 3.